Under the pale morning light of Los Angeles, Michael B. Jordan walked out of the studio with the soft hum of city traffic pressing in from all sides. He had just wrapped a long night of interviews, smiling, performing calm, but inside, he felt a tiredness that went deeper than sleep. The streets smelled of hot asphalt, gasoline, and faint roasted coffee from a vendor nearby. People passed him without much notice, eyes on phones, minds somewhere else. Then, as he reached the corner, a voice, hoarse, raw, called out, "Sir, please, can you help me?" He turned and saw him, a man hunched beside a trash bin, gray hair matted, jacket torn at the seams, one shoe missing. His hands trembled as he tried to hold a paper cup steady. The man's skin was dark, his eyes bloodshot but alert, filled with something ancient, shame, pride, hunger. A few steps away, a woman in a business suit whispered to her companion, "Don't look," and they walked faster. The guard from a nearby store muttered, "He's always here, begging. Don't encourage him." Michael hesitated. For a second, he felt the old fear, the one that says, "Don't make a scene, don't stand out." The air between him and the man thickened with invisible judgment. He took a breath. "You hungry?" The man blinked, uncertain. Yeah, sir." Michael nodded toward the coffee truck. The people in line watched as he helped the man to his feet. He could feel their stares, curious, suspicious. The guard rolled his eyes. "You're not gonna fix him, man," someone said under their breath. Michael ignored it. The man's hand was cold, dry, shaking slightly. Inside the small diner next door, the scent of bacon and eggs wrapped around them. The hostess looked up. Her smile faltered. Sir, maybe a to-go order?" Her eyes flicked toward the homeless man. "We'll sit," Michael said softly. Silence fell across the room. A fork clinked against a plate. Someone coughed. "We'll sit," he repeated, his voice calm but unyielding. The hostess hesitated, then gestured toward a corner booth. The man sat slowly, his clothes giving off the faint odor of sweat and street dust. Michael didn't flinch. He ordered 2 breakfasts and coffee. When the plates arrived, he watched as the man ate, first slow, then faster, like he feared it would disappear. "What's your name?" Michael asked. "Thomas," the man said between bites. "Used to be a mechanic. Lost the shop, lost everything." Michael nodded, listening. Around them, whispers filled the air like static. "Why's he helping that guy? Isn't that Michael B. Jordan? Man, that's disgusting." Each word was a needle, but Michael stayed quiet. He'd been here before, not in this booth, but in that space of judgment, of invisible walls built from ignorance. He remembered his first film set, the way a producer had once said, "You're so articulate," with surprise dripping from the compliment. He remembered interviews where people called him humble for someone like you. He had learned to smile through it. But now, as Thomas wiped his mouth with a trembling hand, Michael felt something shift. He couldn't keep quiet anymore. After they ate, he helped Thomas to his feet and gave him a jacket from his car. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "Just take care of yourself." Thomas's eyes filled. "You saw me," he whispered. "Nobody sees me." Later that day, back at the studio, Michael's manager stormed into his trailer. "What the hell was that about?" he demanded. "You just made headlines for eating with a homeless guy. Sponsors are nervous." "So?" Michael said quietly. "So? You have a brand to protect. People don't like seeing their heroes sitting with street junkies." The words hung heavy. Michael stared at him. "People," he repeated. "You mean white people?" The manager blinked. "That's not what I said." "No," Michael replied, "but it's what you meant." The manager sighed, frustrated. "You're too sensitive, man. It's not about race, it's about image. My image, Michael said, isn't for sale. That night, scrolling through social media, he saw the photos. Him and Thomas sitting together, headlines twisted. Hollywood star feeds local vagrant, publicity stunt or genuine gesture? The comments cut deeper than any review. Of course he'd do that. Guilt complex. Another actor trying to look woke. Bet he didn't even pay for it himself. Michael stared at the screen until it blurred. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. You did the right thing, baby. Don't let them make you doubt it. He closed his eyes. Her words were an anchor. But the noise outside grew louder. The next morning, on set, he felt it, the shift. Crew members who'd once joked with him now avoided eye contact. The makeup artist spoke to him in clipped tones. During lunch, one of the producers said, Michael, next time maybe check with PR before you, go saving people, yeah? Laughter followed, forced and sharp. He smiled tightly. I didn't know compassion needed clearance. Everything does in this business, the producer said, smirking. The table went quiet. Inside, Michael's chest burned. The more he tried to ignore it, the heavier it became, the double standard, the quiet disdain. He thought about Thomas, somewhere on the street, unseen again. And then about himself, surrounded by cameras yet somehow invisible too. Days passed. The story wouldn't die. Talk shows, blogs, gossip sites, everyone had an opinion. Why him? Why now? Who was the man? Michael felt cornered by the noise. During a charity event a week later, a reporter shoved a mic toward him. Michael, do you think your recent act was a statement on racial inequality or just a publicity move? The flashbulbs burned his eyes. He paused. It was an act of humanity, he said simply. That's it. But surely you understand the optics, the reporter pressed. A successful black actor helping a homeless black man. People see symbolism. He breathed in slowly. Maybe the problem isn't what they see, he said. Maybe it's what they refuse to. That line went viral. But with it came backlash. A commentator on national TV sneered. Hollywood loves to play the victim. Jordan should stick to acting. Michael watched, jaw tight, as the host laughed. That night, he sat in his apartment, lights dim, the hum of the city pulsing below. He thought about silence, the kind that kills slowly. He'd kept quiet too many times before, thinking dignity meant endurance. But now he understood. Dignity meant defiance. The next day, he called his publicist. Set up an interview, he said. I'm going to talk. Michael, maybe wait, let it cool off. No, he said. It's time. The studio lights were bright. The interviewer smiled. A blonde woman with perfect posture. Michael, people say you've become a symbol of social justice. Do you see yourself that way? No, he said. I see myself as a man who refused to look away. But surely you realize, she said, tilting her head, that many think you're playing the race card? His stomach clenched. The race card? He repeated slowly. That card you pull when the world won't admit the deck's been stacked. Her smile froze. I think what people mean, he cut in, is they'd rather I smile and stay quiet. A silence fell so complete that the hum of the studio lights seemed deafening. He looked directly into the camera. I helped a man because no one else would. That shouldn't be political. That should be human. When the interview aired, reactions split the nation. Some praised his honesty. Others called him arrogant, divisive. Sponsors hesitated. Calls stopped coming. But Michael didn't regret it. Weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address, just shaky handwriting. Inside was a photo. Thomas, shaved, cleaned up, smiling in front of a mechanic's shop. Got a job again. Thank you for seeing me. Michael held the photo for a long time. His chest tightened. That evening, during sunset, he drove through the same intersection where he'd first met Thomas. The air smelled of diesel and warm concrete. The same coffee truck was there, the same crowd hurrying past. But now, when he looked at them, he didn't feel anger. He felt clarity. He had learned that dignity isn't about being untouchable. It's about standing still when the world tells you to step aside. A few months later, he was invited to speak at a university panel about representation. As he walked onto the stage, he noticed a few skeptical faces in the crowd, young, expectant, guarded. He smiled faintly. "I want to tell you a story," he began, "about a man who was invisible until someone looked." He spoke not about fame or racism in grand speeches, but about moments, small, ordinary, quiet. A waitress's pause, a stranger's laugh, a man's trembling hands. "The hardest thing," he said, "is not to let the world define your worth by how comfortable you make it feel." When the applause came, it wasn't loud. It was slow, growing real. Later, as he left the hall, a janitor approached him. "Mr. Jordan," he said softly, "I saw what you did. Thank you for not pretending." Michael smiled. "That's all any of us can do," he said. Outside, the night was cool, the city lights flickering like distant stars. He stood there a moment, breathing it in, the scent of rain on concrete, the hum of faraway engines, the faint warmth of possibility. Somewhere, someone was still being ignored, still waiting for an act of quiet courage. And he knew deep down that he would never walk past again. Because dignity, he realized, isn't what the world gives you. It's what you refuse to let it take. The morning after the university speech, Michael woke to the vibration of his phone against the wooden nightstand. The sunlight filtered through half-closed blinds, cutting across his room like pale blades. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, his throat still raw from speaking, yet something in the air felt different, like the quiet before a storm. He picked up the phone and saw a flood of notifications. Hashtags, headlines, interviews dissecting every word he'd said. Actor turns activist. Jordan's dignity speech divides audiences. He scrolled through them all, emotionless. But one message stopped him cold. It was from Thomas. Short, shaky, typed from an old phone. "They're shutting down the shelter. I tried to speak up, but they told me to leave. Don't know where to go." Michael sat still for a long moment. The hum of traffic outside seemed to fade, replaced by the slow thud of his heartbeat. He thought of the shelter, the place Thomas had said saved him after the street, where he helped fix the building's boiler just to earn a bed. Michael didn't think, he moved. Within an hour, he was in his car, heading downtown. The sky was gray, the air thick with the smell of exhaust and fried food from vendors. The shelter stood on a narrow street between two abandoned buildings, paint peeling from the brick walls, graffiti fading in the rain. Outside, a small group had gathered, residents clutching bags, boxes, plastic sacks filled with their lives. A woman shouted at a man in a suit, her voice breaking. "You can't just throw us out!" The man, clean-shaven, unbothered, adjusted his tie. "The city made its decision," he said. "This property's condemned. Unsafe." Michael parked across the street. People turned, whispering. He ignored them and crossed over, his shoes splashing through a puddle. "Who's in charge here?" he asked. The suited man looked him over, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Mr. Jordan," he said, smiling a thin, practiced smile. "Didn't expect to see you here. You're closing the shelter?" "City order," the man replied. "Structural issues. Liability concerns. So you're putting them back on the street." "That's not our responsibility, sir." Michael stared at him. "Then whose is it?" The man's smile faltered. Around them, the crowd murmured. Thomas appeared near the doorway, his jacket zipped to the neck, eyes tired but alive. "They came this morning," he said. "No warning." Michael felt the heat rise inside him, the same slow burn he'd felt in the diner that morning months ago. The same silence pressing around him, daring him to break it. He turned back to the man. "You're going to delay this," he said, "until there's another place ready." "We don't answer to you," the man said coolly. "And we're done here." The workers started moving, locking the gate, nailing boards over the windows. Michael stepped forward. Cameras from nearby onlookers flashed. The man in the suit hissed, "Don't do this, Jordan. This isn't your fight." Michael's voice was low, steady. "It's everyone's fight." The man gestured sharply to security. 2 guards approached. For a moment, it seemed like confrontation was inevitable. Then a voice broke through, the city official's phone ringing, a flurry of murmurs as someone shouted, "Media's here!" News vans pulled up, reporters spilling out, microphones ready. The suited man paled. "This doesn't help your image," he said through clenched teeth. "Neither does yours," Michael replied. By evening, the footage was everywhere. Michael B. Jordan standing at the locked gates of a homeless shelter, arguing for people no one wanted to see. Online, debates raged, hero or troublemaker, sincere or staged. He didn't read them. That night, he sat with Thomas and the others at a nearby park, where volunteers had brought blankets and soup. The cold air bit at their faces. "You didn't have to do all this," Thomas said quietly. Michael shook his head. "Yes, I did. They'll go after you now," Thomas warned. "They already are." A faint smile touched Michael's lips. "But maybe that means they're finally looking." The following week was chaos. His agency called, multiple sponsors had backed out, one studio postponed, a project indefinitely. In meetings, the tone shifted from friendly to distant. "You're alienating audiences," they said. "People don't want politics in their entertainment." He leaned forward across the polished conference table. "People don't want reality, you mean?" One executive sighed. "You're a role model, Michael. But you're starting to make people uncomfortable." "Maybe that's the point." The room went still. When he left, his hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. The city outside felt larger, harsher. Every billboard with his face looked different now, like an echo of someone he used to be. Days turned to weeks. He began volunteering quietly at the shelter site, helping coordinate temporary housing through friends. Cameras still followed him, but he didn't speak to them. He wanted the noise to die down, to let the real work breathe. One night, after helping unload supplies at a temporary hostel, he was approached by a young man, early 20s, nervous, holding a notebook. "Mr. Jordan," he said, I saw what you did. My brother was homeless. He died last year. Nobody ever cared. But when I saw you standing there," his voice broke. Michael put a hand on his shoulder. "You don't need to thank me," he said softly. "Just pay it forward." The man nodded, eyes wet. As Michael drove home that night, rain streaked across his windshield, blurring the city lights into trembling gold and red. His mind drifted to the conversations, the faces, the endless cycle of judgment and silence. He thought of how dignity wasn't a shield, but a choice, a refusal to bow to the weight of indifference. Then, one evening, as he prepared for another interview, he received an email from a studio executive. Subject line: "We need to talk." The message was simple: either stay out of activism or we pull the contract. He stared at it for a long time. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, shaking the glass. He opened his phone, scrolled to Thomas's photo again, the one with the mechanic's shop, and something in him hardened. The next morning, he called his team. "Set up a live press conference," he said. I'll handle it. Michael, think carefully, his manager pleaded. This could end your career. Then it's worth ending for the right reason. When the day came, the hall was packed. Reporters, cameras, flashes slicing through the air. Michael stood behind the podium, palms resting on cool wood. The murmurs quieted. He looked around the room, his reflection caught in a dozen lenses. I've been told to stay silent, he began, to protect my image, my career, my comfort. But I can't, because silence is what lets injustice breathe. His voice trembled slightly, then grew steadier. When I helped that man on the street, it wasn't a statement. It was instinct. Humanity. But the way the world reacted told me something. How quick we are to question compassion when it comes from a black man. How we still measure worth by what's convenient to look at. Reporters scribbled furiously. If that makes people uncomfortable, he continued, good. Discomfort means we're still alive. The hall was silent, save for the faint whir of cameras. I'm not here to lecture, he said. I'm here to remind. Dignity isn't fame. It isn't money. It's standing up when everyone tells you to sit down. He stepped away from the podium. The applause started hesitantly, then rose, slow but unstoppable. When he left the building, the air felt lighter, rain-scented, sharp. His phone buzzed endlessly, messages of support, outrage, confusion, but for once, he didn't check them. Instead, he drove back to the shelter. The gate was still locked, boards still nailed, but someone had painted words across the wood in rough white strokes. We see you. He stopped the car and got out. The street was quiet, the neon flicker of a nearby sign reflecting on the wet pavement. He reached out and touched the letters, rough under his fingers. A single tear broke free, not from sadness, but from the unbearable relief of knowing he'd done something that mattered. In the following weeks, community groups rallied. Petitions were signed, protests held peacefully outside City Hall. The shelter's closure was reviewed. Slowly, change stirred. One evening, as he was leaving a late-night meeting, a woman approached him, middle-aged, wearing a city worker's badge. Mr. Jordan, she said, voice steady but soft. We're reopening the shelter. Funds came through. Your stand made people listen. For a second, words failed him. He just nodded, a quiet thank you caught in his throat. That night, he sat in his car for a long time, watching the city lights ripple across the hood. In the rearview mirror, he caught his own eyes, not the actor's mask, but the man beneath. Tired, human, whole. But the world wasn't done testing him. A few days later, a gossip network aired a leaked clip of him at the shelter confrontation, edited to make him look aggressive, reckless. Commentators spun it instantly. Jordan lashes out in rage. Online mobs roared again. He watched it unfold in silence. Then, without warning, Thomas appeared at his doorstep the next day, wearing his mechanic's uniform, hands still stained with grease. Don't let them twist it, Thomas said. You gave us a voice. That's bigger than headlines. Michael smiled faintly. They can twist the story, he said, but they can't rewrite the truth. Together, they went back to the shelter, now under reconstruction. Workers painted new walls, laid new floors. It smelled of fresh plaster and rain. Thomas walked ahead, touching the frame of the door. You ever think one small thing could start all this? He asked. Michael looked around. The volunteers, the laughter, the light filtering through the new windows. One small thing, he said softly, is all it ever takes. That night, as darkness fell and the city hummed like a living organism, Michael stood on the shelter's roof. The air was cool, the moon caught in a halo of smog. He thought about everything he'd lost, deals, roles, approval, and everything he'd found, clarity, purpose, the quiet strength of knowing he'd stood where it mattered. Somewhere below, Thomas called up to him. "Hey, man! You coming down?" Michael looked out over the city, the glow stretching endlessly into the horizon. "Yeah," he said finally. "I'm coming." And as he descended the stairs, each step echoed with something fierce and unbroken, like the heartbeat of a man who had learned, at last, that real dignity lives not in being accepted but in refusing to disappear. The rain hadn't stopped since the night the plane went down. By the time Agent Keller returned to the airfield, the tarmac was a dull mirror of stormlight, and the wreckage of Flight 271 had been stripped to metal bones. The press had moved on. Families had buried the dead. But Keller couldn't let it go. Something in that crash had been too clean, too planned, and the missing cargo, for unmarked crates that vanished between the loading dock and the wreck, haunted him. He lit a cigarette under the shelter of a hangar, watching water bead and roll down the fuselage of a gutted Cessna. Every witness, every document, every piece of data he'd examined circled back to the same ghost. Someone inside the airline knew exactly what was going to happen. He thought of the flight attendant who had survived for 10 minutes after impact, whispering into a paramedic's ear before dying. It wasn't an accident. The tape of that whisper had vanished too. Keller's superior, Director Ames, had ordered him to close the file. "Weather event," they'd said. "Turbulence." But the black box data didn't fit. The instruments had failed simultaneously, like someone had flipped a switch. Keller had been a pilot once. He knew what real failure looked like. This was orchestration. When the storm eased, he drove into town, to a diner that stayed open all night for mechanics and truckers. The waitress knew him by now and didn't ask questions. He took his coffee black and scanned the empty booths. A man slid into the seat across from him, a thin figure in a raincoat, face shadowed by the flickering neon outside. Keller recognized him instantly. The missing co-pilot, Eric Maddox, presumed dead. "You're supposed to be in a box in Kansas," Keller muttered. Maddox gave a crooked smile. "Supposed to be, yeah? You got room for a story that won't make your bosses happy?" Keller leaned forward. Maddox's hands trembled as he spoke. He told him about a call 2 nights before the flight, a private line from a man calling himself Harlan. The instructions were clear: reroute the plane's autopilot mid-flight, disable the transponder, and open the rear cargo bay at 3:17 a.m. over the Gulf. Maddox refused, until he saw the money wired to an account in his wife's name. But when he realized the cargo wasn't weapons or drugs but gold, literal gold bars wrapped in diplomatic seals, he panicked. "It was supposed to be a drop," Maddox said. "Except something went wrong. The storm came in early, and the pilot tried to override. Then boom." His eyes were hollow, sleepless. "It wasn't a crash, Keller. It was a cleanup." Keller asked where the gold went. Maddox stared at his hands. 2 of the crates fell into the Gulf. The other 2, someone picked them up before dawn." He handed Keller a torn photograph, grainy, black and white, a man in a pilot's jacket standing beside a private jet, holding one of the missing crates. Keller turned the photo over. On the back, in faded ink, "Monroe Airstrip, 1978. That name hit Keller like a bullet. Monroe was a decommissioned CIA field in Louisiana, shut down after a corruption scandal. It had become a ghost strip, used by smugglers and ghosts in uniform. Keller knew because he'd worked there once, before he joined the Bureau. He looked up from the photo, but Maddox was already gone, the door chime still ringing, his coffee untouched. Keller paid the check and drove south through the night, headlights slicing through rain that felt endless. He reached Monroe by dawn. The place looked dead, hangars sagging, control tower leaning like a drunk, vines curling around rusted fences. But someone had been there recently. Fresh tire marks in the mud. A set of footprints leading to a hangar door half open. Keller drew his pistol and stepped inside. The air smelled of kerosene and old dust. A single light flickered overhead. In the corner, a tarp covered something large. He yanked it off. There it was, one of the missing crates, pried open, empty. A faint humming filled the air, like a generator running nearby. He followed the sound to a small office at the back of the hangar. Inside, a radio crackled, voices in code. "Harlan," one said. "Phase 2 completed. Asset compromised." Keller froze. He grabbed the mic. "This is Keller. Who is this?" Silence, then a calm voice. "Agent Keller. You should have stayed buried with the rest." The line went dead. Tires screeched outside. Keller ran to the window just in time to see a black sedan speeding away down the old runway. He jumped into his car and followed, but the mud slowed him down. The sedan vanished into the trees. For the first time in years, Keller felt fear, cold and precise. Someone had been watching him from the start. Back at the hangar, he found a folder on the floor, water-damaged but legible. Inside were photographs, surveillance shots of him over the past 3 months. His apartment, his car, his sister's house. On the last page, a typed note. "Stop digging or we'll finish what the storm didn't." He took the folder, burned it, and drove west, toward Houston, where Maddox's wife supposedly lived. But when he reached her address, the house was empty. Windows broken, mailbox stuffed with old letters. Neighbors said she'd vanished weeks ago. No forwarding address. That night, Keller sat in his motel room, staring at the rain-streaked window. The reflection in the glass wasn't his. Someone was standing behind him. He turned, gun raised, but there was no one there. Just the faint smell of cigarette smoke and a small envelope on the bed. Inside, a Polaroid, the same crate, now inside a government vault, stamped with a new code. Property of Department 9. He'd never heard of that division. He called Ames the next morning. "You know anything about Department 9? He asked. Silence. Then, "Keller, where did you hear that name?" "From a ghost," he said. "One you buried." Ames sighed. "Then stop talking. You're in over your head." The line cut. That's when Keller realized the truth. He wasn't investigating a crime anymore. He was inside it. Over the next week, he traced every lead Maddox had given him. Bank accounts, cargo manifests, offshore transmissions. Each one led to the same shell company, Blue Horizon Logistics. On paper, they moved food aid. In reality, they'd been laundering gold through disaster relief flights for years, under the cover of turbulence, sabotage, and crash insurance. Flight 271 had just been another delivery gone wrong. One of their own had tried to take the gold. The storm had been convenient. Keller couldn't go to the bureau. They were in it too. So he went to the only person who owed him a favor, a retired reporter named Lila Hart, who'd once exposed a weapons smuggling scandal. She met him in a motel outside Dallas, her tape recorder already running. He told her everything. When he finished, she just said, "You realize if this goes public, they'll erase both of us." Keller smiled with a humor. "Then make sure it's loud." The story went live 3 days later. Within hours, the site crashed. By dawn, Lila was found dead in her car, an apparent suicide. Keller disappeared. No record, no trace. But 6 months later, in a classified warehouse near Langley, a security guard on night shift saw something that didn't fit. A flight jacket left on the floor, soaked with rainwater, and a note pinned to it. It read, "2 crates still missing." Then the lights flickered, and the security cameras went dark for exactly 17 minutes, the same timestamp that appeared on the black box recording from Flight 271. When power returned, the vault containing the gold was empty again. Some said Keller had done it. Others whispered he was dead, his body never found. But years later, a new rumor surfaced in a declassified memo. A cargo pilot in Venezuela, using the alias Harlan, had been seen wearing a jacket stitched with the initials JK and flying a private jet with no registration. Somewhere, above a storm, a voice came through a radio. Phase 3 begins now.